Welcome to Within the Frame, where we bring the most pressing issues across the globe into focus. I'm Kim Mok-yeon. Artificial intelligence is transforming every layer of society, from classrooms and clinics to economies and elections. But while technology races forward, global human development seems to be stalling. The latest UNDP Human Development Report, released today, titled A Matter of Choice, warns of widening inequality, eroding agency, and deepening distrust unless we act deliberately. As digital divides harden and AI systems reflect the biases of their creators, the stakes are growing globally. At this turning point, how can we ensure AI serves people, not the other way around? And what roles should nations such as Korea play in bridging capability gaps and advancing a more inclusive, ethical, and human-centered development model? To explore these critical questions, we speak with Pedro Conceição, Director of the Human Development Report Office at the UNDP, here in the studio with us. A big welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Director, let's begin with the big picture first. So the 2025 HDR opens with a stark warning that AI is accelerating while human development stagnates. Director, what structural changes are essential to bridge the gap between technology and human progress at this point?
Well, let's go back to the state of human development. Human development is this idea that people should be able to live lives to their full potential. And what we found in the report that we launched earlier today was that, as you said, globally, if we look globally, progress on human development is very slow. In fact, it's the slowest it has been in 35 years. At the same time, we see that the gap between the countries at the top and at the bottom of human development is widening. Now, for the fourth year in a row, after many decades in which it was contracting. So this is, on the one side, we see this slowdown in progress in human development and widening in inequalities. In the context of the report, we also ask people what they expect about AI. So not a prediction about what AI will happen, but what do people expect? And we found that in lower HDI countries, 2/3 of the respondents to our survey expect AI to be important in their lives, in the world of work, health, and education. So we need to bridge this gap between slowdown in human development and the expectation that people have that AI is going to be an important part of their lives.
That's going to be a big challenge moving forward. Now, building on this contrast, Director, the report also stresses that development is a matter of choice. So how can national governments and international actors align their policies to prioritize people over platforms?
Well, I think the first important point is to look at AI or look at technology more broadly as something that in itself does not determine social, economic, or political outcomes. Often people think that we are destined to have AI, for instance, replace people just because AI performs as well or in cases better than humans at some tasks. And the importance of emphasizing choices is to make the point that actually it's not about what the technology does, the performance that it has, but rather the way in which it is incorporated in the economy, in our society, in our politics, and the kind of choices that individuals, that firms and governments make that will ultimately determine what happens with AI.
So by choice, we mean the way it's been encompassed in our daily lives.
Exactly.
So, Director, let's also touch upon another key framework that's been introduced in the report. It's the idea of complementary economy. So for starters, it could be a new term. Could you explain for us what it means and how AI might be used to amplify human creativity and purpose?
Well, it goes back to this notion of choices, right? So choices, but what kind of choices should we be making? So in a Human Development Report, we are concerned with advancing human development, expanding human development. And one of the things that we emphasize is that in the world of work, AI should not be used to replace people, but actually to work with people, together with people, to complement what people do. So the complementary economy comes from this notion that AI should complement what people can do and actually enable them to do more, to augment what people can do. Another way in which AI can be helpful is in helping people to be more creative, be it in artistic expression or in scientific discovery, if we use, again, AI as a companion, as something that complements what humans can do, as opposed to something that competes with humans. So the idea of complementarity, complementary economy, is about finding ways to make sure that AI works with people as opposed to AI competing with people.
That seems to be a very difficult task. It's a very competitive society, of course, and people are kind of worried about being replaced by AI. So, are there any efforts being made on that front?
Well, exactly, because say people are worried about being replaced by AI because they see that AI can, for example, answer a medical exam very well, all the questions in a medical exam. Does that mean that AI is going to replace a doctor? There are several reasons why that is not likely to happen. One is that what a doctor does goes beyond just the clinical knowledge that the doctor has. There are many other things that a doctor needs to do. Also, patients, may not appreciate interacting with a machine as opposed to interacting with a person or a human being. What AI can do, though, is help the doctor do its job in a better way. That's, again, this idea of complementarity, this idea of augmentation that we emphasize in the report. So again, it goes back to the fact that it's a matter of choice. It's not determined by the technology, it's determined by the way in which we deploy the technology.
So humans decide and AI just helps along,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Now, at the heart of human development seems to be is agency. A recurring insight in the report is that digital technologies can both empower and also control. How do you protect human agency in this increasingly algorithmic world, especially for these vulnerable groups?
Well, it goes back to choices and the kind of incentives, regulation we put in place. So again, to stay with the example of the world of work, AI can be used to, in some sense, to surveillance of work tasks. So that would be something that curtails agency. But it can also be used, as I mentioned earlier, something that enables workers to do more and to do their tasks better. So it goes back to this notion of putting the emphasis on the objective. So if the objective is to enhance human agency, we should not deploy AI in ways that curtail it through surveillance, for instance, but actually in ways that augments what people can do.
So algorithms should only serve and not shape
Exactly.
our decisions and choices moving forward. Now, this challenge is especially visible in places where access seems to be limited in regards to AI. In many regions, especially low and middle income countries, digital infrastructure remains inadequate. Director, what immediate interventions does the UNDP recommend to ensure that AI actually contributes to inclusion rather than exclusion?
Well, it starts with the infrastructure, as you mentioned. But I think there's something important about AI that's different from previous technologies as transformative as, for instance, as the internet or electricity. So closing these gaps in access to electricity, which many parts of the world actually still don't have, access to the internet, so closing these digital divides is very important. But the crucial point here is that AI does not require the same kind of physical infrastructure that is demanded of internet or electricity. And I'll just give you an example that illustrates the speed and the reach of AI. So when ChatGPT emerged in November 2022, over 90% of the traffic came from high-income countries, from these countries that already passed the digital divide many years ago. But a few months later, the majority of traffic was already coming from middle-income countries. So as long as people have access to the internet and they have obviously access to electricity, they potentially already have access to AI. And so that even strengthens the case, I would say, for closing these digital gaps and closing these gaps in infrastructure, particularly what we call digital public infrastructure, infrastructure that is really inclusive and enables wide access to AI and other digital technologies.
So in order to boost AI accessibility, not a lot of technology is needed, right?
Not physical infrastructure in the same way that is needed for electricity, where you need to build a grid or in a decentralized way some kind of solar station. In the case of the internet, you need cables or some kind of satellite. But once you have these basics, in a sense, we already have AI potentially accessible. And I think that makes it very different from previous technologies with the potential of AI to transform our economies and our societies.
So building general digital foundations would be helpful in this front. Now, let's also turn to the cultural dimension of AI, Director. One of the report's striking visuals shows that ChatGPT answers reflect cultural patterns of very high HDI countries, like you've touched upon a while ago. How do we decolonize AI to ensure it reflects global diversity?
Well, first of all, AI is used or is trained based on examples and data that comes from our societies, from what we write, from what we share. And we have to recognize that our societies are biased. So it should not be a surprise that AI models themselves are biased because reflect that society. Now, if we take that further to the fact that societies have different cultural traits, if the majority of the models are made and trained based on data that comes from a particular part of the world, it's not surprising that they do not reflect the cultural diversity that exists around the world. So what we need to do is to make sure that we provide access to data, to the languages that enable models to be more representative of that cultural diversity that exists around the world, but that we do it in a way that is not extractive, but do it in a way that we find ways and mechanisms to enable the populations and the cultures that are contributing to enrich these AI models also somehow are rewarded from the fact that they are sharing this to make these models more culturally diverse.
And that also kind of returns to our previous discussion of, providing equitable digital foundations to many countries. Now, as for South Korea, it offers a very unique case in this point, having transformed itself into a tech-forward economy with strong public institutions. What kind of lessons do you think can be drawn from South Korea's example to inform global strategies on AI for sustainable development?
Well, I would suggest that we look at the transformation of Korea over a long period of time. And I mean, there are many lessons that can be drawn from Korea, but the one that I would recommend is to acknowledge that there are no shortcuts when it comes to development. So the process of Korea reaching where it is today was sometimes turbulent, volatile, but the key element, in my view, for the success of Korea was that it invested in human development. So it looked not only at technology, it looked not only at the economy, it looked also at health, education, and had that comprehensive perspective to guide the evolution of the country. So that focus on human development, I think, is what led Korea to be not only a rich economy, but a technology leader around the world. So that came as a result of the investments and emphasis on human development. And I think this is a very important lesson for countries around the world. Don't try to shortcut and try to get to the technology like Korea is able today. Take the steps, invest in people, invest in health, invest in education, in improving the performance of the economy, and ultimately technology will also get there.
So South Korea's trajectory from a recipient to a contributor could be a powerful case study in this regard. Now, on the global stage, Director, in what ways can Korea actually, through multilateral engagement, contribute to global standard setting around ethical AI? It's a hot topic these days, digital public infrastructure, and also inclusive governance.
Well, I think here we can take the framework that was agreed by United Nations member states of the Global Digital Compact. And there are three elements. There are many things in the Global Digital Compact, but I will emphasize three elements that provide ways in which Korea can contribute. So the first element of the Global Digital Compact that I think is important is to promote a dialogue across different countries on how to regulate AI, because different jurisdictions have very different views at the moment on the regulation of AI. So rather than imposing something that applies everywhere uniformly, I think it's important for countries to learn from one another, and I think Korea has a very important voice in contributing to this process, but also learning from others. The second element of the Global Digital Compact is that this comparison, this learning needs to be informed by science. And here again, I think Korea, being a leader, scientific, technological leader, has something important to contribute. And the third element has to do with creating the conditions so that all countries, including low-income countries, also have an ability to be part of this AI journey. And so again, I think Korea now, given that it's a rich country and has the resources, could also contribute to enable lower income countries to be part of this AI story, so that we don't have a world, as our Secretary General said, of AI haves and AI have-nots.
So continuous engagement and dialogue between many countries would be essential. Now let's bring the focus to the ground level, Director. Could you share with us some successful UNDP projects that demonstrate that AI is already contributing to education, health, or poverty reduction, particularly in the South?
Well, I think the first thing to emphasize is that we should not deploy AI for AI's sake. We should try to understand what are the kind of interventions, what are the kind of policies that we know are effective, and then see how we can leverage AI to enable us to do those interventions better or at a larger scale. So an example in education has to do with teaching to the right level. We know that one of the things that enable students to learn the most is by teaching at the right level. Now, this is very difficult to do in low resource settings, in low income countries, when you are limited in the number of teachers that we have. But AI can support a teacher in that role, enabling different students to learn at the right level. So this is an illustration of the kind of approach that we should be pursuing by trying to look at what kind of interventions do we know work, and then use AI to enable us to scale or to make them even better.
So making use of them in real life cases. Let's finally look ahead. Looking ahead with urgency and hope as we navigate the era of climate shocks, conflict, and tech disruption. What is the single most important principle that should guide human development efforts in the AI era?
I think it's to put the focus on people and not the focus on technology. So I think we should ask less what kind of wonders does AI do, and much more in what ways is AI helping people do the things that are important to them. So I think this shift in focus is crucial. So we need to ask, as we were just discussing, how can AI help us to educate children better? How can AI help us to enhance health outcomes? How can AI help us to diversify economies? And the answers to these questions are not in the technology or in the capabilities of the technology, are rather in the ways in which we use and deploy the technology, and also in the way in which AI is going to evolve in the future. So shifting or at least complementing the focus on the capabilities of AI as such, as a technology, to include also the extent to which AI helps people to do what's important to them.
So making use of AI as a very important tool that could boost our decision and our judgments would be very important in this AI era moving forward. But I'm afraid we will have to conclude our discussion at this point. We had a very wonderful discussion tonight. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And for your insights tonight. Director Conceição, we appreciate it so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that'll be all from us on Within the Frame. Be sure to tune in again next time as we continue to explore the stories that matter. Until then, stay informed and engaged.